Okay, folks, we are all quarantined here, and you are too, I think, depending on where you are. But I've taken it upon myself, without anything else to do, to really tackle raised garden beds that I don't have to come and deal with constantly. I like to do things that I won't ever have to come back to, and or will have to come back to very little. And I watched the neighbor make raised garden beds last year. She's got a fence up here now, but a lot of people come out and frame something up on the ground and put some stakes at the corners and put their dirt in there, and then they wrap their chicken wire around it, and you know, most of the animals and stuff can't get in there, but a deer, he just walks over and bends down and just squishes the fencing down, or it's all wiggly chicken wire and it looks crappy. And once you've got it there, you can't really move the whole thing, and you're kind of committed to it, and they're not very good looking, and they're not really user friendly, and you had to make a gate, and a gate's basically a door, and a door really works on the principle of everything being rigid and square and true, especially because you're hanging the weight of any kind of a door or a gate off of, you're cantilevering it off of this whole side. So even this little wall, it isn't fully framed, but I framed it enough to install a door. So that then you try and make a gate between two posts, or you take your fencing down to get in and then put it back to get out. They're always just trash. So I had this inspiration to use an IBC container, which are these shipping and handling containers for fluids, for commercial fluids, acids and cleaning products, and all different kinds of stuff. The mulch, the dye that they dye wood mulch with, comes in these, so you can get food grade. Let people keep their water in them, but it's a tank inside of a tube steel cage, the cage being attached to or part of a pallet base. And the tank has a petcock, valve out of it. And so a lot of people store potable water in there, or, there's a million people make deer blinds with them. They make all different types of garden beds with them. There's a bunch of different cool IBC container things out there. But most of the garden beds that I see are wheat beds and these other like fancy water. The big idea is that they're easy to water the plants or something like that. I'm not doing any of that. I just wanted a raised bed that ticked a few boxes. This is me. Hi. I want to walk up and work at a table height, 40-some inches high. I don't want to be bending over, crawling around. I wanted it totally varmint-proof, so the top of it has to be 7 or 8 feet up off the ground so that a deer can't hop up and over it. This is a small enough footprint that they wouldn't be inspired to jump up in there unless you get a really stupid deer, and it can have a top on it. But I wanted it to be smooth, straight, square, just nice looking overall, so that cage is going to control our hardware cloth and cause it to be flat and smooth. I wanted a door in and out of it, like we were talking, that has some, has nice functionality, latches quick and easy, stays out of the way, smooth operation. And I was going for a lot of reusability, and so being on a pallet, I can grab it with the skid steer, which isn't here, I guess, but I can pick it up, move it all around the yard. I can pick it up and move it in the fall. I can set it back up in the spring. If I make a few more of these and I sell them, I can pick them up and put them in the back of somebody's truck. They're mobile, and they have a lot of structural integrity as a finished unit. When you've put a foot of dirt in there, it's so heavy. Sorry, I had something in my teeth. There's a lot of weight there, especially when it's wet dirt or moist dirt. It's too much weight to really move around. And when people frame something up on the ground, once again, it's just a falling apart pile of garbage after a couple of years that you can't do much about. So this is relatively sci-fi and relatively high-tech. But when you do something like that, usually the caveat is it's relatively expensive. So I was trying to control cost here, and this is our prototype. And as you can see from the drawing, my plan was to put it up on bales of straw or mulch, because again, it's heavy, and some of the most reliable structure to bear weight like that is solid blocks of wood or something solid. I didn't want to have to construct something heavy enough or engineer it heavy enough and work to the ground, which is just uneven. A couple stacked up hay bales, old mulch bales, works just fine. Here's our tube frame that goes around the tank. Here's a tank that's been cut down to hold the dirt, and then the hardware cloth has been applied, and we cut a door out, and it's really nice. It's got this nice little latch here that where is he? There he is. Just slides over the tube. So we're going to go through all the finer points of this, but ultimately you can swing the door open. I got a little carabiner here. He hooks there, which is easier with 2 hands. I may trick that out a little bit more, but he's stainless steel, and then you can work right here. You got all your cut edges are protected, openings filled, and the hinge is real nice and easy to use. And I'll probably put another door like this just on the other side, because I can reach almost to that far side on this side here. And really what I'm thinking of is, if I'm trying to pick a tomato that's way over there, it's sort of out of my reach and unhandy. We're going to start with one door and maybe upgrade to two. So I had the IBC container was the major expense here. We had a roll of galvanized hardware cloth. That's what this is called, 1/2 inch square. What I had already was 3 feet, so that gets me from the top to this position, which you can get up and over in there, and then a 4 foot will do you to here. So the one that I bought is 4 feet. The hinge is just a radiator hose, ordinary from the car store. It's 5/8 size. These tubes are like 0.7, so not quite 0.75, not quite 3/4 of an inch. 5/8 hose, slid with some, obviously took some twisting and some lubrication, slides onto both of these and creates an excellent hinge. A lot easier than trying to use anything built for flat surfaces or woodworking, or mechanically. That's just works great like that. And then this is a piece of 3/4 inch PEX tubing for hot water. And well, it's red, which is generally what you're supposed to use for hot water. It's the only red thing on here. So with all of the visual busyness, if somebody wants to you send somebody to your house to do something for you and pop into your garden, they're not crawling all around trying to figure it out. It draws your attention. So it comes over and stops just short of that and slides over there, and it can't go so far that it exposes the opening once again, which is real nice. And it just does that. And there you have it. This is sort of version 1, and we worked some things out here. We went to most of the stuff's from Lowe's, and so we got some tube plugs for a 3/4 inch tube, which did fit in there because it's just nominal, and they seem to go in real nice. That closes the opening in these pipes to keep a mud dauber, wasp, or anybody else from building. Certainly when there's a food source and a place to live that's in the sun all day, it's too attractive and we'd have wasps building in here. So these plugged all those holes there. And then on the tops, I went right over it with a different kind of cap that slipped right over and down, so the water doesn't go up and around and in there at all. It looked kind of nice. And then up here where we cut these off like that, just to keep you from banging your head there, we use some of this pipe insulation on the top and across the bottom here. So overall this is real nice to use. One of the things that is still happening is where we cut little windows in the hardware cloth, that's sharp. Every one of those little cuts is sharp for this opening here and the opening for the latch. So I'll show you what we're going to do about that and how I laid out the door and the tank to make the cut as well. Here's how we're working with the hardware cloth. We'll get the roll started underneath a 2x4 that we can hook on with a tape measure, and the other end of it down there out of the way, which makes it nice after you get a circumference measurement for your tank. But we laid the door out basically between what I want to call the first horizontal. We cut those off flush, and then we took an inch so that we have room for that foam to come through under here and to cap these, and that won't interrupt. Over here we took a 1/2 inch, so this is where the latch is, but we wanted to be able to put a plug in there which has some distance, a plug in there which has some distance, and still have enough clearance that even though you may manipulate this a lot, that it'll never crash and bang in. So we cut it open just enough there. So we had 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. Then we did 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, so that there's room once again for the foam and the end caps. And then in the middle of this dimension here, between the two verticals, right in the center of that, we took 1.5 inches, and 1.5 inches, and 1.5 inches. And that's because when you bend this pipe, that's ultimately what you consume from where it's a circle to where it kinks around to where it's a circle again, because there's tube in there. That's basically what you need to do almost 180 degrees, I figured out. So that was essentially, as you stand here, we did 1/2 inch, inch, 1.5 inches, and took this whole section out of here. And then it was just a matter of cutting ourselves a length of radiator hose that is flush here to there. So you notice it stops here and stops there, and that's because I want to be able to install this tightly and know that everything's correct if I'm having any kind of interruption or banging, or if it's been after 200 times open and closed, anything's changing. I know that the ends of this rubber should be touching this post and this post. It was 7.5 inches, 1, 2, 3 pieces. And then I needed to heat it a little bit with the torch, and because it's kind of chilly out, that certainly helps it. But I also lubricated both the pipe and the inside of the hose with I used Croil, which is silicone based. Any kind of silicone spray or penetrating oil is mostly for steel projects and rusty bolts and nuts. I liked a silicone product or a silicone lubricant, but that helped me twist and jam and twist and jam. I was here probably 10 minutes working the tubing onto all 3 of these together until it was tight. And then as far as making this piece of 3/4 pex into a latch, 3/4 doesn't slide around this size, so I went to the bandsaw and just carefully made a cut, and then I jammed 2 big putty knives into that cut and reefed them apart several times. I even used the MAP gas on the opposite side to soften this. I just played the torch up and down it briefly to make it warm, hot, so you notice it stayed open. Normally that cut would be tightly closed. And then I drilled like a, I don't know, 1/4 inch hole right on center on the pipe, and I cut over to it and cut it out to the end and rounded everything around, and that made a nice tear protected. You don't want a sharp inside corner, you want a radius, which is why I started with the drill. But that protects that from ripping off. But I made that work out. Oh, also, not only did I take a 1/2 inch here, but I made it work out so that it was greater on this side and less on that side, and not right in the center of the run. That's so that I'll turn this latch so you can see it like this. That's so that the latch backs all the way off and stops and clears, but then when you send it over there and it stops, quite a bit is still hanging over that gap and providing, creating a latching scenario. And this little tab basically stops you and keeps you from so you're not sitting there going ooh, trying to align it. It's a positive stop, and then I slide over. And as I clean that up with a little bit of steel wool and put a little bit of that silicone oil on there as well. But as we use this more and more, and this becomes its life and cycled, you want it to be a little tight to begin with, and for it to loosen up over time and not just be sloppy right to begin with, if you know what I mean. But that really makes for a strong door. And you can use this for any, now you can do it, use this to create a door through this cage for kind of any reason. Some guys make it so that it won't come off the forks on their forklift, and make a basket that they can go up and work in, like a scaffold. Like I said, a deer blind or anything else, a playhouse makes an excellent door just for that. And the way that I cut, you notice the line on the tank, I got that by taking a marker while it was in the cage still, and being careful not to go up or down, but to keep it flat and just to go around through all of these openings, touching it down with the marker, and I can be sure that within the tolerances of this whole thing, that's going to be a smooth, level cut, and now the line goes all the way around. And I'll just tip him up, and I'll use this ordinary skill saw with a smaller or higher tooth per inch. You notice that's it's still a rough cutting style tooth, but there's, I don't know, probably 60 on here. It's more of a plywood blade, which is essentially a high tooth per inch, and you just move right along, and it'll cut that like butter. And you just go, cut, just keeping the cut on top and turning the tank and cutting again, turning the tank, cutting again. Make sure to line up the beginning and the end when you get around to the corner, and then it slides right down inside. And then we're going to just go around with hardware cloth, zip tying it to the top rail to start with, and then zip tying it to the bottom after that, keeping the grid of it on this grid, which keeps it kind of straight and normal. And then we'll cut the same sort of gaps out. We'll take this same gap out here, the same sort of 1.5 to 2 there, and I make it work out on a smooth, make it work out right along the wire so that there's no sharp ends sticking out. But we'll cut that all out and make a window for this. And then to my original point, my hands are all cut, sliced all up from fighting with it. But when you're finished, then you get yourself some of this edge trim, which if you have no taste, you put it on the edges of your doors on your vehicle. They sell it in chrome and gold and other stuff. I just got black, but you take that flexible stuff and just chase it around all of these edges, cleaning that all up real nice and smooth. And we're going to come back and look at this one when it's all done being, perfect, as nice as I can, learning everything that I learned making the first. And we'll see how that all worked out. I also think I'm going to do round like curves in the door and not a sharp corner, because that edging will go right around the curve and keep going instead of having to be kinked or torn on the corner itself or made in two pieces. And because that little piece of hardware cloth, that corner up there is kind of bendy, and a deer could just shove his face in there and nibble. So being an arc between these two ends and a web, in the negative space, it should have more structural integrity to a certain degree. And it'll look pretty cool being curved the way that these corners are curved. And in the end, even though it stands out like a sore thumb and isn't quaint and made of wood and cutesy, I think it has sort of a hydroponics 21st century farm sci-fi kind of a look. And and the last piece of the puzzle, which I thought was even cooler, is the top of the tank can be slid back down inside, and I'm going to put a door into it as well, and I think it'll work like a greenhouse. So I think we'll be able to get things started here. I'm going to put some different edging that's more of a gasket, like foam, on both edges of the tank, and then we're going to attach the interior piece of plastic to this door and put a gasket around it, so when you shut this door, it kind of seals against the breeze. And you should, in theory, be able to get stuff started in here using it like a greenhouse. And then when it comes up and then you're ready to stop doing that, you can just slide that top of the tank out and store it and just let everything grow right up inside of here. And I may make a finished piece of hardware cloth that sits on top that you just take some paracord or something and basically just do a whip stitch around between the sides and the top all the way around to just fully seal it. And if you're growing berries or something like that, you're going to want that top on there for the birds, because they'll be right in there. And if you're growing something and you want to get rid of things like Japanese beetles and stuff too, what's cool about this, you can go down to 1/4 inch, and once you have 1/4 inch on there, you could even put fly screen on there or even finer screen on there. So it's like a cascading order that keeps it nice and flat and smooth and trim and substantial. But you could close that down to something that even the tiniest bugs and stuff can't get inside of, being from here, which is, this plate is rolled right around to there. So if you get down beyond that and can get around there with zip ties or something, or drill holes through it, it could be pretty darn sealed tight, which would be sweet. You would have to do something about these openings. But I have faith in you, people that want it that badly. Anyway, this will be a lot nicer, and like I say, when I'm done with it for the year, I can pick it up and they stack up vertically and don't take up a lot of space, especially if you have a lot of ceiling height. So there you have it. Tune in to the following episode when it's finished and looking perfect.